Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome along to this webinar this Friday afternoon. This webinar is going to show you some of the features of Navisworks to review and plan your advanced steel projects. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jonathan and I'm a customer success manager with Graitec here in the UK. For those of you that need to contact me, you've got my Twitter handle and my Graitec email address, jonathan.hand@graitec.co.uk. So the idea for this webinar has been brought about by the introduction of advanced steel into the AEC collection. So now lots of our clients now seem to have Navisworks and advanced steel on their PCs, and the idea came about of how we could utilize and showcase what Navisworks can do and help you to plan and review your projects. So today we're going to look at unlocking the power. I'm not going to go through Navisworks in total. It's such a vast and big program, so I'm just going to go through some key points. So first of all, we're going to look at how we can take the advanced steel project out and get it into Navisworks, and then we're going to use a feature called the timeliner to timeline the project and simulate the build and erection sequence of the project. As part of that, then we're going to create a walkthrough so we can actually take you inside the project, walk about, have a look and review and look at some of the components, the connections, and then finally we're going to utilize that up into the cloud, and we're going to create some renders utilizing the Autodesk cloud rendering solution. So enough of the PowerPoint for me, and I'm going to jump straight into advanced steel. So you can do this for any type of project. There's no limitation. On this project, I've just sort of mocked up a sample structure containing some columns, some rafters. I've created some hanging details with racking, and then I've added in some footings and some basic concrete walls. So any type of project can be exported. You don't have to do anything extraordinary to the advanced steel model. Just detail as you normally would. Create all your drawings. I tend to number the project because then I can get all the numbering and manufacturing data straight across into Navisworks. So the first things first, how do we take this model and put it into the Navisworks software? So the kind guys at Autodesk have the import and export ribbon, and in the last 3 or 4 versions they've incorporated an export button directly on the export and import tab. So this will create a 3D DWF for import into Navisworks. You can also go to the application menu, export, and then you can create the same thing from the export menu, but obviously the interface here. Now, on my PC I have when you run this first time, so when you run it for the first time on your PC, it will prompt you and ask you, once it creates the DWF file, what do you want to do? And there is an option to click yes to open within Navisworks. So on my system from now, because I clicked yes many weeks ago, it will automatically open Navisworks. If you have not got that option, you can just save the file locally, then open up Navisworks from your product on the desktop and then file open. But on my system, because I do this quite a lot, I can just click export to Navisworks. So what will happen here is we'll start to publish the job. So it's now processing, so it will take a second or two just to publish out the job, and on my system it will automatically launch Navisworks. Now you can see down the bottom right I've got a plot and publish job complete message, and the system has automatically created the file. And as I said, my system will automatically launch Navisworks Manage. So because it's auto launching, the model will automatically open in the Navisworks platform. So you can see that it's working through the loading process, and there we have the Navisworks model open, which as we can see is exactly the same orientation, the same view as my advanced steel model. So for those of you not familiar with Navis, it looks a little bit different, and there's lots of different interfaces and different workspaces that you can set. Mine's sort of a little bit of a custom one where I've set up the key things that I want, but the first thing I like to always do is I go to the view tab and I just like to put a background on my model just so it's easier to see the model and see what we're working with. So this has similar controls to what we have in Advanced Steel. I can orbit the model, I can zoom in, I can have a look, I can check. If I go to my home tab, you can see that I've got lots of different things turned on and off. So properties, where if I select an object, it will show me the properties of that component. So you can see that I've got all the beams. If I've got properties off, you can see that these little views and tabs disappear and appear as we need them to. So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to timeline a project, and the timeliner on my screen is located at the bottom, and I'm just going to undock it so that I can start to work with it. So what the timeliner allows me to do, it allows me to add a series of tasks that can simulate, in my case, the build process. So in order for a task to work, what you need is a selection. So you need a selection of an object that will then be linked to the task, and the task can then be linked to a time, and therefore we can timeline the build sequence of a project. So I'm just going to undock this, and we're going to look at the sets. So this allows me to create a set of objects that are linked. So when I look at I've got a selection tree here, I can drill down, I can select all the beams in the project, I can select all the bolts. So these are predefined selections that come as default out of the export. So it splits it down into a hierarchy in the selection tree, and I can expand each one and then select individual anchors. And you can see that I can create a selection set here based upon the beams, the bolts, concrete footings, walls, plates. So to start it off, I'm going to start with the concrete footings, and I'm just going to go save selection. And this now creates a selection set, and I'm just going to call it footings. So that is just automatically marked that as a set of marked components. Just when I click it, you'll see that it selects in blue all the footings that I've selected. I've also got this little thing where I can actually find items as well. So I can go through my system and I can actually drill down the complete project and then start to create and find objects based upon various different conditions and selection sets. So when I look at my project, I go to the find items on the category. You can see that it takes all the Advanced Steel data across, the stuff that we're used to, so the approval statuses, geometry, materials, notes. But if I look, for instance, look at the section type, I can then choose a property based upon the section type is based upon a profile. The condition, if I say, is equals, and that will drill down my complete project and show me all the components that's there. So if, for instance, I select the 203, so if I say section, and I go find all, you see the way that it will automatically find every beam of that section in my project. And if I look at the 305s, find all, see that will find the rafters at the top. So if we look at this, we go find all, you can see that it's automatically found all the columns. And then if I go to save selection, and I just add that as the column. So now I've got a footing group, or a footing set, and a column set. So just by using the find, and you can just pick objects manually, but if we go through it, so we can select all these, click find all, it will find all the RSA plates, 203, find all. We can see that we'll find all the independent rafters. We find all, you can see that we'll find the racking system, 305, so it will find the rafters, save selection set, and I choose that as a rafter. Go back to find items. Again, I am doing this pretty rough just to get the speed into the system. Save selection. I'm just going to call them link beams. So I'm just creating a selection set of, basically I'm sort of trying to simulate. I put the columns in first, then the rafters, then put all the link beams in. I would then go through and find all the internal beams. So I've just very quickly created some really quick selection sets. I can go back to my selection tree, drill that down again. In this case, just select my concrete walls, save that as a selection set. So I'm doing this really sort of quite quickly, but you can take your time. So I'm just creating a selection set for each of these. When I create the selection set, if I go back to my timeliner, I'm just going to undock this so I can just see it fully in my model. So I'll just take this down a little bit to there. So I've got these selection sets which are here, and you can see that each one highlight a different component in my model. And what you can do is down here in the, if we undock this, so we've got the timeliner, and what we do is we create a series of tasks. But what you can also do, if you select the auto add tasks, you can actually add a task for each set. So you can see the way I've manually created each set, but if I click auto add the tasks for every set, it will add in a task. Now when we start to look at the tasks in more detail, you can see that we can have active tasks. You can give them an individual name, they have a status, but more importantly, what they can also have is a planned start date and a planned end date. We can also look at actual starts and actual ends. So what you do to timeline the project, you look at your task, which is linked to a selection set. In my case, this is all the footings. I can then go, the footings are going to be put in on a particular date, and then it could end on a particular date. And then we have the task type. So the task type will show how we simulate the project. So when we look at the configuration tab here, you can see that it has some predefined tasks already defaulted in your Navisworks. Again, these come out of the box. So if we look at this in very simple terms, we've got a construct, demolish, and a temporary. So if I want to look at a build sequence where I want this to be erected, I'm just going to look at the construct task. So that is going to show, and what it linked to each one of these is the start appearance and the end appearance. So when you look at the construct, it says that at the start it's going to show 90% transparent. You can select that, select the pull down, and you can change it. So you can create individual ones. So I can choose, I can hide. So if we just leave everything as is, so I'm not going to do too much configuration. And then the end appearance, once it simulates, is going to be the exact same as what's in my Navisworks model. So if we go back to the task, you can see that the task types are all linked to construct. And what we then do is we have a start, plan date, and an end date. So what I can simply do is I can click this and say the end date for this is going to be the 20th. So that goes from the 19th to the 20th. This can then start on the 21st and it can end on the 22nd. You can see that Navisworks will automatically, when you add these tasks, it just adds in the days, but you can change it. And you can even drill it down even further into the time, whether it's all day, whether it's a half day, whatever it may be, 4-hour slots. You can start to simulate this build process. So you start each task, you link it to the dates, link it to the task type, and then we can actually look at the simulation process. So if we look at simulate, this allows me to play a little video that will actually start to show the build process. Because it's linked to my tasks, the tasks are linked to a start and an end date, and then they're linked to a task type. So if we look at simulate and we go to settings, we can actually set the duration of the little video that we're going to create. So I'm going to say it's a 30-second playback, and then I'm just going to click play. I might just take this down a little bit so we see it a little bit further. So we've got the current configuration set, and we click play. So you can see that at the bottom of the screen you're seeing the timeline starting to generate, and then up above that in the canvas area we'll see the model start to erect. So you can see that we get a 90% model transparency for the columns, because that's what's about to come. Then they go to a model color once they complete, then the rafters start to pop in, and each time we simulate it through, then we get the link beams, and then we get the conveyor system in. So you can see really quickly I can then put in the walls. So in the space of 5-10 minutes I've been able to quickly go in, simulate that, and then what we do have the configuration here so that we can export this animation. So you can actually take it from your timeline or simulation, you can link it to the viewport, we can change the type of AVI that it is, and then we can export that out. So if you want, you can save that out to your system and then save it to your desktop, and that will create a little video clip of your timelining situations. You click save, and then off it will go and render it up, and then save that out onto your desktop, which you can share with your site managers, your clients, so they can actually start to see what is happening. Okay, so that sort of looks at the timelining element of it. So it's a really useful tool. Again, that is a sort of a very quick process through it. So I'm just going to close that down, and now we're back in to Navisworks. So another thing I wanted to start to show you is that we can actually use Navisworks to walk through the building, and we can actually sort of create a path for how we're going to look at this. So if I close down my selection sets again, and we start to look at what else can we do in Navis. So I know that I can orbit the model, I can view it round, I can have a look at it, but what we can also do is go to the viewport tab, and this is where we can start to look at, you can change the type of render styles, and you can put no lighting on, you can change the mode, wireframe, but we also have this thing called look around, and this just allows me to go in, zoom in the model, and I can just look around it any way that I want. So I can zoom in, find a particular element, and just change the view. So that sort of fixes the point of where you're looking, and then you can look throughout the complete model. So that's a really nice. I'll just take that back a step because I've lost it, and we zoom out to there. So we've got this ability to look around, but we also have the ability to walk around the building. So when I switch it to walk, it goes straight in to perspective mode, and I can use the view cube, and I can turn perspective off if I want, but I'll just leave it in. You see, when you go into walk mode, you get a little pair of feet. But if I set this so I look around the project a little bit better, so I'm sort of down at that level, and then I go into walk mode, and all you do is you sort of just left click, and you can see that I'm slowly starting to walk around the model. And what you can then have is this thing called realism. So when you select the pull down, you've got these 4 controls, and you can put on collision detection, gravity, and crouch. So if I just take these off for now and just have a look at, as we're starting to look around the project, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a little walkthrough. So we're just going to walk through the project like that, and every time we get to an area that interests us or we want to see a little bit more, we've got this thing up here called the viewport. And if I click save, you can see over here in the save viewport, and I'm going to go JH view 1. And each time I walk through the building, you just hold left click on your mouse, and you just sort of orbit round, push the mouse where you want to go. So I'm just going to come over to the top of this rafter. I'm going to come in there, have a little look. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to save the viewport again, and I'm going to go JH view 2. And then I'm going to continue walking over. You can, depend on how far you click across, I'm going to come around here, have a little look at that, orbit it round, and then we save this as another viewport. We can just go over the top of the building like that, and just have a look around. So you can see, you can get full scope of what you're starting to deal with, what size and scale of the project. And then I can say viewport JH view 4. I can just spin it round. I can look around again if I wish. Save that as a viewport. Ooh. So again, just create all the different views that you want. And let's create one more. I'm just going to rename this view that I've also created. So I'm just going to rename, I'm going to call it JH View 7. And that can be dragged down below 6 if we wish. What I can then do is do a Windows select, create all of these. And we can export them as an XML file. But what we can also do is in here is that we can add an animation. I'm going to go JH walkthrough 1. So with an animation added, you can simply select the views that you've created, drag them into the animation, and you can see that when we've created the viewports, that saves them into here. But then once we create the walkthrough, we can now simply click play. So what this will do is this will walk through the project based upon all the saved views that I've got. So when we click walkthrough, the system will just start walking through round each of the views that I visited. So this is the first one. Remember when I looked at the top rafter? Finds it, has a little look, then it continues the path that I navigated. So really quickly you can create a little walkthrough for your client so they can start to see exactly where they're going. You can go up and down, you can look around. Again, I've done this pretty quickly, but you can start to see that Navis can really quickly render this up. And it just spins around, it visits all the views that you want, so you can go up and down in the model, orbits about, but you really do get a full idea of the scale and size. That's another really cool, exciting feature that you can start to utilize. And you can see it's really quick. Just go in, save the viewports, and then orbit the model, and then create your little walkthrough. So one of the final things I want to look at is the rendering tab. So rendering works very similar to the way that it does in Advanced Steel, because it's predominantly using the AutoCAD engine. So if we look at Autodesk rendering, it launches this rendering tab. So I'm just going to come out of the review or the viewport. I'm just going to go to look around. Let's go to here. So we go back to this. So with the rendering, you can just apply materials. So if I find a steel material, I can just drag it to my object, and that will then apply that material finish to it. If I've got whatever it may be, you just drag it, drop it, and you can see how quick it is and easy it is to quickly apply a material. We'll find some paint, so look at metallic paint. You can apply that to all the plates. So it's just a drag and drop situation. Find your object, and if we sort of, let's go with that. So really quickly I've went in and just applied a material to it. So we can render, we can do normal stuff, but what I really want to focus on is the rendering in the cloud. This is a sort of a newish feature, so it's very prevalent in Revit. We do it quite a lot, but we can render in the cloud, and what it will do is it will give you the ability to not only render still images but also do the interactive panoramas, which is the really cool bit. So if I just click render in cloud, the reason I'm showing this is because we're using cloud rendering. It can be done really quickly. So what I'm going to do is when you click the cloud rendering, looks at, I'm going to render the current view. The output type, I can choose a still image, but you know what, I'm going to choose a stereo panorama. So that's going to create a file that will allow me to orbit the model within a rendered image. And then click rendered quality. I can pick standard, final, exposure, different sizes, but I'm just going to go with the pretty standard one. I'm going to click start rendering. and it will go off and upload the model to the Autodesk rendering. And I'm going to do this live because I'm not going to do any smoke and mirrors on the time that it takes, so it should be relatively quick. And you can see that it shows a little window that it is rendering my model in the online cloud. So if I click render in process, it will open up a website, which is the Autodesk Cloud Rendering. It should automatically sign me in, hopefully, which it has. And you can see that on the left I've got my project, and if I click into it, it will tell me that my job is currently rendering and the queue time is less than 10 minutes. You will see on the left it's got latest rendering, and it's got, you can see down the bottom right, it's got a little Google Cardboard image. That means it's a stereo panoramic, which means I can put it into the cloud rendering system. So we'll just let this run. Hopefully I don't run out of things to talk about. This should be relatively quick. You see there is a little status bar here where it is whirling away. So it should be relatively quick to produce this. You can see that I do get the mouse symbol in it, and there is starting to be a shadow cast in the model, so there's something there. I'm just going to go back to my screen and go back in and see if that just improves the timeline. So whilst that's waiting, I'm just going to open out the webinar. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have anything to ask of what they've seen thus far? If you want, I can unmute you if you wish to talk, or you can just stick your hand up if you want to just chat, or just type it into the chat window if you've got anything that you want to ask me about what we've seen. I will just sporadically check back. And see how that is getting on. So we've got a question: can you import plant and create lifting sequences? Yes, anything that can be exported out will come in. It's just a matter of creating the selection set, and then you obviously will need to be a little bit more detailed in the selection sets and the process and the beams each time. But yes, anything that can be, Navis will read anything. So whether it's in your advanced steel model, doesn't really matter. Navis can read lots of different file formats and objects. If it's in advanced steel, yes, definitely it will come through. So yes, I would be pretty confident that I would be able to get it to simulate anything. Once I see it in Navis, I can select it and then create it from a selection set. So the answer to that would be definitely yes. You just need to be a little bit more controlled and not do as just create a better selection set of the objects. The better the selection set, then the better the tasks, and then the better the sequence will look when you animate it. As you're watching, I'm just going to start rendering another model. So the beauty of cloud rendering is that you can just keep pushing models up to the cloud. So you can see that I've now got 2 images coming. So there's one. If you look at all renderings, you can see there's 1 and there's 2. What may help the rendering process is if I just remove the materials. I'm just going to undo this back so there's no material applied. So we go back to that, render in cloud, stereo panorama, start rendering. The beauty of cloud rendering is that it's not taking any machine resource, so you can continue to work. So I've just got a question. Can you show individual members being installed within a selection set to show a more realistic construction process? Or would you need to select the members on their own? You would need to select the members on their own and then just save that as a selection set. You can't drill down in the selection set. So if you were doing individual members, it would just take a little bit more time in terms of the selection set, because it would be a selection set for each one. But in theory, yes, it could be done, but you would have to do each individual beam and member. The way I've shown it, it looks a little bit better because I'm selecting multiple beams, but you can't drill down within the set, but you can create sets of each member, which would be a lot and time consuming, but could be done, yes. So I'm just not having much luck with the rendering. I'm just going to render up again. So render in cloud, keep it very simple. So no materials are applied. Stereo panorama. So let's see if we've got some more luck with this. When I did a test prior to the webinar, it was done in about 2 minutes, but I think this is just the luck of doing it live. The servers are a little bit slow, but hopefully in the next minute or two it should create my render pretty quickly. just bear with me. This hopefully shouldn't take much longer to render. It's because I'm doing a panoramic. So the panoramic will do a full 360 view of the model, and we can just orbit it completely, but it just takes a little bit more time. So has anyone any more questions of what they've seen or what they would like to see, or have they seen enough? So it is nearly getting there, so hopefully this slowly but surely renders. So now that we have eventually rendered, so apologies for that, you can see that because I created a stereo panorama, so this is available, so you can send people a web link. You can share it out to a public gallery, to A360. I can share it via email. So if I copy that link, I can then share it in I hopefully can share it in the group chat. So anyone can now click that. It should open in their browser, and they will have the ability to just do a complete panoramic and look at the building. So it did take a little bit of time, possibly just due to the fact of my broadband width, in the fact that I'm on a webinar and I'm uploading to the cloud as well. Just had another question on can we just pop that out? Can we combine the walkthrough with the build sequence? And yes, you can link it. So there is an option that when you're in the animator panel, so you've got the animation here, there is a possibility, once I find the animator, to add a scene, and then we can link the scene to the viewport animation. So it is possible. It just takes a little bit of setting up on how to do it, but you can link the animation to the build sequence to the scene. I think it's quite a good idea to showcase that. So I think on my next webinar I'll possibly do that, or I will create a little a blog on it, because that would be quite useful just to see a properly done build sequence linked to an animation. So yes, I will I think that's quite a good idea. So anyone just wants to click that link that I've shared in the message, if you click it, it should just open up on my screen. If you have a look, you'll see that it gives you the ability to share this with anyone that does not have, they don't need any package, they just need the internet. And you can see that they just select it and share it. So cloud rendering will become more and more of a thing. It's sort of quite newish to us on the structural side of things, but something new and something that you can start to look at and share. So I'm going to finish up the webinar now. I hope you found this informative, something a little bit different, and it's sort of just taking and unlocking these extra tools that lots of you now seem to have with collections, and Navisworks is becoming more and more mainstream. That with our advanced steel project, it is just a single click out. And then within Navisworks, there's a whole host of stuff. Obviously, Navisworks predominantly is used for clash checking and quantification, but there is lots of other little features like the timeliner, like the rendering, the animations, just walking about and viewing it. So I'm going to finish up for now. If you need to contact me, it's jonathan.hand@graitec.co.uk. You can ring any of the Graitec offices, you will get me there. Just drop me an email. I'm pretty active on Twitter and LinkedIn as well, if you want to just drop me a message on anything that you've seen. Just finally, before I finish, just like to thank you all for attending. I hope you found it somewhat useful. And I will see you and speak to you all very soon. Enjoy your weekend and have a good one.